Hello and welcome to today's Dwelling in the Word. Today's reading comes from Matthew chapter 5, verses 17 through 20 as we continue in the Sermon on the Mount. Let's hear what Jesus had to say. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, we have a tendency, I believe, to set aside all kinds of commands, rules, and laws. For example, what is the speed limit in your neighborhood? What is the speed limit on the daily routes that you take every day? We might answer, well, I'm in a hurry. I'm a good driver. I'm not going to hurt anybody. I haven't been in any accidents, so that law doesn't really apply to me. It's more of a suggestion, more guidelines and recommendations than it is a law. And it's only a problem if you get pulled over. And it's not bad unless you get a ticket. Besides, on top of all that, we all know that when the traffic's really going, you got to keep up with everybody else so that you don't cause an accident and you cause someone to get hurt because you're obeying the law, right? And so we have all sorts of ways that we justify ourselves and our actions to set aside rules, laws, and instructions, and we actually encourage others to do the same. Now, Jesus tells us that we simply cannot, we must not do this with the commands of God. Now, if we know anything about the story of Scripture at all, then we know that the very first story is about one of God's commandments, one that might have seemed like it was one of the least of these being violated. The commandment was simple, if not seemingly insignificant and inconsequential. Just don't eat the fruit from that tree in the middle of the garden. And it seems harmless enough. No big deal. Is there a way around that? God can't be serious about this. And yet we know that when humanity violated just this one simple commandment of God, it has brought all kinds of havoc and pain into our lives. And it turned the lives of Adam and Eve upside down by simply ignoring and then breaking one of the commandments that God had given. Now, you and I need to keep the commandments of God. We need to do what Christ taught us to do, and we need to teach each other to do the same. And we have to be careful that we are not adding our own rules to God's commands and telling people that they have to do or what they're not allowed to do on the basis of our rules, our traditions, because God actually told us, he commanded us not to do this very thing. God said that we are not to add to his laws, add to his commands, and forcing your rules on someone else violates God's commandments. So don't do that. But again, we need to hear what Jesus said. I don't think he was kidding around at all when he said, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law were finding loopholes. They were finding ways to get around the commands of God, just in the same way that we justify looking for loopholes and ways around rules, instructions, laws of the land today. They were doing this with God's law, God's commands. And just as we sometimes can be, they were more passionate about their rules, their traditions, than they were about the law and the commands of God. So don't go there. Listen to Jesus. Keep the commands of God, and you will be called great in the kingdom of heaven.